The stars had been burning for 3 days straight above Viridian Prime, not the natural light of distant suns, but the terrible glow of a world dying under alien fire. Admiral Kexthal watched from the bridge of his massive warship as the last city on the planet below turned to glass and ash. Another world had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire. "Resistance has ended, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a thin creature with silver skin and 6 eyes. "The planet is ready for processing." Kexthal nodded, his forearms folded behind his back. This was the 47th world they had conquered in less than 10 years. Each victory came easier than the last. The galaxy's species seemed to grow, weaker with each passing year. Or perhaps the Zephyrians had simply grown too strong. His fleet stretched across space like a metal storm. 200 warships of various sizes surrounded the dying world below. The smallest of his vessels could destroy a moon. The largest, his own flagship called the Void Render, could crack a planet in half with its main weapon. No force in the galaxy had ever stood against them and survived. "Set course for the next target," Kexthal commanded. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The human colony world in the Kepler system." The tactical officer's eyes widened slightly. "Admiral, our intelligence reports indicate 12 million humans live on that world. Should we offer them surrender terms first?" Kexthal's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Humans are weak creatures. They fight with primitive weapons and have no unity. Their colony world will fall in hours, not days. We waste no time with surrender offers." Across the dark void of space, 300 light-years away, Captain Jake Morrison was having the worst day of his career. The coffee machine in the UES Defiance mess hall had broken again. The artificial gravity generator was making strange humming noises, and his engineering report showed 17 different systems that needed repairs they couldn't afford. The Defiant was not an impressive ship by any standard. Built 30 years ago as a patrol frigate, she measured only 400 feet from bow to stern and carried a crew of 43. Her weapons consisted of 6 torpedo tubes, 2 rail guns, and a collection of point defense systems that worked most of the time. Against pirates and smugglers, she was adequate. Against anything more serious, she was little more than an expensive coffin. Morrison sat in his captain's chair and rubbed his tired eyes. At 35, he was young for a ship commander, but the human colonial navy was always short on experienced officers. Most of the fleet was stationed near Earth or protecting the major trade routes. Ships like the Defiant got sent to the quiet sectors where nothing ever happened. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station. She was 28 years old with short blonde hair and the kind of steady voice that stayed calm during emergencies. "I'm picking up a transmission from Kepler 442b. It's on the emergency frequency." Morrison straightened in his chair. Kepler 442b was the agricultural colony they were supposed to protect, though protection was probably too strong a word. The planet had 12 million farmers and their families living in scattered settlements across 3 continents. Their only defense was an orbital platform with sensors and communication equipment. "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The speaker crackled with static, then a frightened voice broke through. "This is Colonial Defense Platform Alpha calling any human Navy vessel. We have detected a massive fleet approaching our system. Repeat, massive alien fleet inbound. Our long-range sensors count over 200 ships of unknown design. Colonial shipping has been ordered to evacuate, but civilian transports are too slow. Request immediate military assistance." Morrison felt his stomach drop. 200 ships meant this was not a pirate raid or border dispute. This was an invasion fleet, probably the same alien force that intelligence reports said had been conquering worlds across the Outer Rim. "Get me Chief Engineer Clark and Weapons Specialist Grant," he ordered. "Full tactical alert. I want every system checked and ready in 10 minutes." Sergeant Ben Clark arrived first, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. He was a big man in his 40s with the kind of practical intelligence that kept ships running when everything went wrong. "Captain, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I should remind you that our reactor is held together with spare parts and prayer. We push her too hard and we'll be floating dead in space. Corporal Lisa Grant appeared next, her red hair tied back in regulation style. She was young but had trained on every weapon system the Navy used. Sir, I've run the diagnostics. Our torpedo magazines are full, but we only have enough railgun ammunition for maybe 20 minutes of sustained fire. If we're going up against 200 ships? We're not going up against 200 ships, Morrison said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. We're buying time for the colonists to evacuate and for reinforcements to arrive. Foster looked up from her station. Captain, I've been monitoring fleet communications. The nearest Navy task force is 8 days away at maximum speed. Even if we send a message right now, help won't arrive for over a week. Morrison stared at the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. The red dots representing enemy ships were moving steadily toward Kepler 442b at their current speed. They would reach bombardment range in less than 6 hours. The colony's evacuation ships were big and slow, designed for moving grain and livestock, not running from invasion fleets. How many people can the evacuation ships carry? He asked. Foster consulted her display. Maybe 2 million if they pack. The men like cargo, the rest. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Morrison closed his eyes and tried to think. 10 million people were going to die unless someone did something. The Defiant was the only military vessel in the system, and she was completely outmatched. Running away was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that would keep his crew alive, but Morrison had grown up on a colony world much like Kepler 442b. He remembered the wide fields of grain swaying in alien winds, the small towns where everyone knew everyone else, the children playing in parks under foreign stars. Those people down there weren't soldiers or politicians. They were farmers and teachers and shopkeepers who had never hurt anyone. Clark, how long can we maintain full power without burning out the reactor? He asked. The engineer scratched his beard. Maybe 18 hours if we're lucky. But Captain, 1 frigate against 200 warships is suicide. Grant, what's our maximum effective range with the railguns? 50,000 kilometers for accurate fire, sir. But those alien ships are huge. Our weapons might not even scratch their armor. Morrison stood up and looked around the bridge at his crew. These people trusted him to make the right decisions, to keep them alive, to bring them home to their families. Leading them into a hopeless battle violated everything he had learned about command responsibility, but sometimes being a leader meant choosing between bad options and worse ones. Set course for the asteroid field at the edge of the system, he ordered. Best possible speed. Sir? Foster asked, confusion clear in her voice. If we're going to make a stand, we need every advantage we can get. Those asteroids will give U.S. cover and limit their ability to bring all those ships to bear at once. We're going to hit them fast, hit them hard, and make them pay for every mile they advance toward that planet. Clark shook his head. Captain, this is crazy. We can't win this fight. Morrison looked at him steadily. Sergeant, we don't have to win. We just have to hold the line long enough for those evacuation ships to get clear. 10 million lives are counting on us. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant throb of the ship's engines. Morrison could see his crew weighing his words, understanding what he was asking of them. Finally, Grant spoke up. Well, if we're going to die gloriously, at least let's take some of those alien bastards with us. Foster nodded. Aye, Captain. Course laid in for the asteroid field. Clark sighed and headed for the door. I'll see what I can do about getting more power out of this old reactor. If we're going to fight the impossible fight, we might as well do it right. As the Defiant changed course toward what might be their final battle, Morrison sent one last message to Colonial Defense Platform Alpha. This is Captain Morrison of the UES Defiant. We are moving to intercept the alien fleet. Begin immediate evacuation of all civilians. We will hold them as long as we can. The Defiant raced through space toward the asteroid field, her engines pushed to maximum power. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge watching the tactical display as the alien fleet drew closer to Kepler 442b, the red dots representing enemy. Ships moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of metal locusts descending on a helpless world. "Captain, we're getting scattered reports from the evacuation ships," Lieutenant Foster reported. "They're loading as fast as they can, but the process is taking longer than expected. Families don't want to leave their homes. Some are refusing to board." Morrison clenched his fists. He understood the colonists' reluctance to abandon everything they had built, but they didn't have time for sentiment. Every minute of delay meant more people would die when the bombardment began. "Keep monitoring their progress," he ordered. "How long until we reach the asteroid field?" 15 minutes at current speed," Foster replied, Chief Engineer Clark's voice crackled over the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I've got the reactor running at 110%. That's well beyond safe limits, but it should give us the speed and power we need for the first engagement. Just don't expect miracles." Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to engage an enemy fleet that outnumbers us 200 to 1. I won't lie to you about our chances. This is probably a one-way trip." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. Foster was checking weapon systems with steady hands despite the fear in her eyes. Grant was running final diagnostics on the torpedo tubes. Even the junior officers were working with calm efficiency. "But those people on Kepler 442b are counting on us," Morrison continued. "They're farmers and teachers and children who never asked for this war. If we can buy them time to escape, if we can delay this alien fleet even for a few hours, millions of lives will be saved. That's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for." The ship fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the throb of overstressed engines. Morrison waited, knowing that some crews might mutiny rather than face certain death. But these were Colonial Navy personnel, volunteers who had sworn to protect innocent people. Finally, Corporal Grant's voice came over the intercom from the weapons bay. "Captain, speaking for the crew, we're with you. Let's show these aliens what humans are made of." A chorus of agreement echoed through the ship. Morrison felt a surge of pride despite the desperate situation. These people understood what honor meant, what duty required, what courage looked like when everything was on the line. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a chaotic maze of rocky debris left over from the system's formation. Some of the asteroids were as large as cities, others no bigger than houses. Dense clouds of metallic dust and ice particles drifted between the larger chunks, creating a natural labyrinth that would challenge even the most skilled navigator. "Take us in," Morrison ordered. "Find us a good hiding spot where we can set up our first ambush." Foster piloted the ship expertly between the floating rocks, using the Defiant's smaller size to navigate passages that would be impossible for larger vessels. The alien fleet was still an hour away, but Morrison wanted to be in position when they arrived. "Captain," Grant called from her station, "I've been studying the tactical data on these alien ships. Their largest vessels are over 3 kilometers long. They'll have trouble maneuvering in this field." "That's what I'm counting on," Morrison replied. "Their size and numbers are advantages in open space, but here they become liabilities. We need to think like pirates, not soldiers." He turned to Foster. "Signal the evacuation ships. Tell them they have maybe 4 hours before the shooting starts. After that, we can't guarantee their safety." The Defiant found a hiding spot inside a hollowed-out asteroid that had been mined decades earlier. The old mining tunnels provided perfect concealment for the ship while giving them multiple escape routes. Morrison positioned his vessel near the tunnel entrance where they could strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond. "Weapons check," he ordered. Grant ran through her systems. "All torpedo tubes loaded and ready. Railguns are charged and targeting systems are online. Point defense is operational. Communication systems are ready," Foster added. "I can monitor enemy transmissions and jam their targeting if needed." Clark's voice came from engineering. "Reactor is stable at maximum power. We've got maybe 16 hours before something important breaks down, but she hold together for now." Morrison studied the tactical display one more time. The alien fleet was approaching the outer edge of the asteroid field, their massive ships beginning to slow as they encountered the first scattered rocks. He could see the formation changing as the larger vessels fell back and smaller scout ships moved forward. They're being cautious, he observed. They don't want to risk their big ships in this maze. Smart tactics, Grant agreed, but it also means they're splitting their forces. Morrison smiled grimly. Exactly. Instead of facing 200 ships at once, we'll be fighting smaller groups. The odds are still terrible, but at least we have a chance. The first alien scout ships entered the asteroid field 20 minutes later. Morrison watched through the ship's external cameras as 3 sleek vessels, each about twice the size of the Defiant, picked their way carefully between the floating rocks. Their hulls gleamed with an odd metallic sheen, and strange symbols were carved along their sides. Those are their reconnaissance ships, Foster whispered. They're mapping safe passages for the main fleet, Morrison nodded. Then we need to make sure they don't report back. Grant, target the lead ship. Foster, be ready to move the moment we fire. The alien scouts were 1,000 meters away, close enough for the Defiant's weapons to be devastatingly effective. Morrison waited until all 3 ships were in a narrow passage between 2 large asteroids, giving them limited room to maneuver. Fire, he ordered. The Defiant's torpedo tubes launched their deadly cargo in perfect sequence. 6 missiles streaked across the void, their warheads designed to punch through the heaviest armor. The alien ships detected the attack and tried to evade, but the confined space worked against them. The first torpedo struck the lead scout ship directly amidships, tearing through its hull in a brilliant explosion. The second and third missiles followed, reducing the vessel to burning wreckage in seconds. The trailing ships tried to retreat, but more torpedoes found their marks. Within 30 seconds, all 3 alien scouts were destroyed or crippled. The Defiant was already moving, racing through the mining tunnels to a new position before the enemy could locate them. Direct hits on all targets, Grant reported with satisfaction. That should get their attention. Morrison was already planning the next move. Foster, did you intercept any of their communications? Yes, sir. They're using a frequency we've never seen before, but the computer is trying to decode it. From what I can tell, they're calling for reinforcements. Good, that means more ships will come into the field instead of going around. The more of them we can lure in here, the better our chances. The alien response came faster than expected. A dozen larger ships entered the asteroid field, their weapons already charging for battle. These were not scouts but full warships, each one capable of destroying the Defiant in a single salvo. Morrison felt sweat beading on his forehead. This is where it gets interesting. Grant, prepare a spread of torpedoes, but don't fire until I give the word. Foster, plot us an escape route through the densest part of the field. The alien ships spread out in a search pattern, their sensors probing every shadow and crevice. Morrison held his breath as one of the warships passed within 500 meters of their hiding spot. The enemy vessel was massive, bristling with weapons and armor that made the Defiant look like a toy. They're getting close, Foster whispered. Wait, Morrison replied. Let them commit to the search. We need them spread out and distracted. When the alien ships were at maximum dispersion, Morrison struck again. The Defiant burst from concealment like a hunting cat, firing everything she had at the nearest enemy vessel. Torpedoes and railgun rounds hammered into the alien ship's hull, causing significant damage but not destroying it. Move, 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 Morrison shouted as return fire lit up the space around them. The Defiant dove between 2 massive asteroids as alien. Energy beams carved through the rock where she had been moments before. The enemy ships converged on their position, but the narrow passages prevented them from bringing their full firepower to bear. They're adapting faster than I expected, Morrison observed as the aliens began using their own weapons to clear wider passages through the asteroid field. Captain, Foster called out, I'm picking up communications from the main alien fleet. They're requesting a status report from the search group. Morrison made a quick decision. Can you jam their communications? For a few minutes, maybe. But once they figure out what we're doing, they'll compensate. Do it. Every minute we can keep them confused is another minute for the evacuation ships. As the Defiant prepared for the next phase of battle, Morrison realized that the alien commander was probably as frustrated as he was. The enemy had overwhelming superiority in ships and weapons, but the chaotic environment of the asteroid field was neutralizing many of their advantages. Admiral Kexthal paced the bridge of the Void Render, his forearms twitching with barely controlled rage. For 2 hours, a single human ship had been making fools of his elite forces. 7 scout ships destroyed, 3 cruisers damaged, and still, the tiny vessel eluded capture. "Report," he demanded, his voice carrying the edge of growing fury. His tactical officer's 6 eyes darted nervously. "Admiral, the human ship appears to be using the asteroid field's natural obstacles to mask their movements. Our larger vessels cannot pursue effectively in the confined spaces." Kexthal's mandibles clicked sharply. "Then send smaller ships. Send everything that can fit through those passages. I want that human vessel destroyed immediately." "Admiral, we have already committed 47 ships to the hunt. Perhaps we should proceed with the planetary bombardment while a smaller force deals with this nuisance." The suggestion earned the tactical officer a withering glare. "That single ship has cost us more casualties than the last 5 worlds combined. We do not proceed until this insult is answered. Send every fighter and corvette we have." Deep in the asteroid field, Captain Morrison watched his tactical display as more red dots poured into the rocky maze. The enemy was committing serious resources to hunting them down, which meant fewer ships threatening the colony world. "Captain," Foster reported, "the evacuation ships are making good progress. They've got about 4 million people loaded so far, but they need at least 6 more hours to finish." "Then we give them 6 more hours," Morrison replied, though he wasn't sure how they would manage it. Their torpedo reserves were down to 60%, and the aliens seemed to be learning from each encounter. Chief Engineer Clark's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I've been monitoring their weapon signatures. These aliens rely heavily on energy-based systems. Their targeting computers are incredibly advanced, but they seem to have trouble adapting when their sensors get confused." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking, Ben?" "Well, sir, these old mining asteroids are full of metallic ore that plays hell with sensors. If we could create some kind of interference field, it might level the playing field a bit." "More," Grant looked up from her weapons console. "Actually, Captain, I might have an idea. What if we use our torpedoes differently? Instead of trying to destroy ships directly, we could detonate them inside asteroids rich with metal ore. The explosions would create debris clouds that would scramble their sensors." Morrison considered this. "Show me." Grant pulled up a tactical map of the surrounding area. "Look here, sir. This asteroid cluster has high concentrations of iron and nickel. If we detonate a torpedo inside the largest one, the metal fragments would spread out in a cloud about 10 kilometers wide. Any ship trying to pass through would be flying blind, and we could use that cover to attack them while they're confused." Foster added, catching on to the plan. Morrison smiled for the first time since the battle began. "Do it, but be ready to move fast once we spring the trap." The Defiant moved deeper into the asteroid field, staying ahead of the pursuing alien ships by using passages too narrow for the larger vessels. Morrison found a perfect spot near a cluster of metal-rich asteroids and waited for the enemy to find them. 20 minutes later, a squadron of alien fighters entered the area, their sleek forms darting between the rocks as they searched for the human ship. Morrison counted 12 of them, each one about half the size of the Defiant, but much faster and more maneuverable. "Wait until they're all committed to the search pattern," Morrison ordered. "Grunt, target the big asteroid with the highest metal content." The alien fighters spread out in a careful search grid, their sensors probing every shadow. When they were perfectly positioned, Morrison gave the order, "Fire." A single torpedo streaked across the void and buried itself deep in the target asteroid before detonating. The explosion was spectacular, sending millions of metal fragments flying in all directions. Within seconds, a glittering cloud of debris surrounded the alien ships, confusing their sensors and disrupting their communications. Now! Morrison shouted. The Defiant burst from concealment, racing through the debris cloud with Grant firing everything they had. The confused alien fighters tried to respond, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto the human ship through all the interference. Rail, gun rounds, and torpedoes found their marks with devastating effect. 4 alien fighters were destroyed. In the first pass, their wreckage adding to the chaos. The surviving ships tried to retreat, but the debris cloud extended for kilometers in every direction. Beautiful work, Morrison said, as they watched 3 more alien ships collide with each other while trying to navigate blind through the metal storm, but their celebration was short-lived. The alien response came swiftly as heavier ships entered the field, using their powerful weapons to simply blast clear passages through the asteroid clusters. "They're adapting," Foster observed as she watched alien cruisers methodically destroying obstacles with concentrated fire. Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we adapt too." "Grant, how many asteroids in this field have been hollowed out by mining operations?" Grant consulted her database. "Dozens, sir. Some of them have tunnel networks that extend for kilometers." "Perfect. Foster, plot us a course through the old mining tunnels. We're going to play hide and seek." The next phase of the battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Defiant would appear from one tunnel entrance, strike at pursuing ships, then disappear into another passage before the enemy could respond. Morrison used every trick he could think of, turning the asteroid field into a 3-dimensional maze where size and numbers became disadvantages. When alien ships tried to follow them into the tunnels, Grant would collapse the passages with precisely placed explosions, trapping the enemy vessels in dead-end corridors. When the aliens tried to go around, Foster would guide them through shortcuts that brought them behind enemy formations for surprise attacks. Admiral Kexthal watched the battle reports with growing disbelief. His forces had destroyed exactly 0 human ships while losing over 30 of their own vessels. The single enemy frigate seemed to anticipate every move his commanders made. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We have superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower. How can one primitive ship cause such devastation?" His tactical officer studied the data carefully before responding. "Admiral, I believe we are seeing a fundamental difference in combat philosophy. Our forces are trained to overwhelm enemies with superior firepower in open battle. These humans appear to specialize in unconventional warfare." "Explain." "They do not fight the battle. We expect them to fight. Instead, they create new conditions that favor their smaller ship and inferior weapons. They use the environment as a weapon, turn our advantages into disadvantages, and strike where we are weakest rather than where we are strongest." Kexthal's eyes narrowed. "You admire them. I respect them, Admiral. This level of tactical creativity is unprecedented in our experience. They are fighting a battle we have never seen before." In the asteroid field, Morrison was discovering just how exhausting unconventional warfare could be. He had been on the bridge for 6 hours straight, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death for his crew. "Captain," Clark reported, "we're down to 40% on torpedo reserves and 30% on railgun ammunition. The reactor is holding steady, but we're pushing every system beyond design limits." Morrison checked the evacuation status. "Foster, what's the word from the colony ships?" 7 million people evacuated so far, sir. They estimate 3 more hours to finish loading. 3 more hours. Morrison looked at his ammunition reserves and did quick calculations. At their current rate of consumption, they would be down to point defense weapons within 90 minutes. "Grant, we need to make our remaining weapons count. No more suppressing fire or warning shots. Every torpedo has to kill a ship." "Understood, sir. I've been studying their ship designs. The smaller vessels have a weak point near their engine sections. If I can hit them there, even our reduced firepower should be enough to destroy them." Morrison nodded. "Do it, Foster. Find us the most complex part of this asteroid field. If we're going to make our last stand, let's make it somewhere that favors us completely." The Defiant dove deeper into the asteroid maze, heading for a region where the rocks were so densely packed that even small ships had trouble maneuvering. Behind them, the alien pursuit continued, but Morrison could see from the tactical display that enemy commanders were becoming more cautious. "They're starting to respect us," he observed. "Is that good or bad?" Foster asked. Morrison considered the question. "Both. They'll be harder to surprise, but they'll also commit fewer ships to each attack. That means we can pick them off in smaller groups." As if to prove his point, only 6 alien fighters followed them into the dense asteroid cluster. Morrison waited until they were deep in the maze before springing his next trap. "Grant, collapse that passage behind them. I want them trapped in here with us." The explosion sealed the tunnel, cutting off the alien ship's escape route. Now it was a straight fight in close quarters, exactly the kind of battle where human reflexes and creativity could overcome superior technology. The battle that followed was brutal and personal. The Defiant limped through the asteroid field, her hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere from multiple breaches. Captain Morrison sat in his damaged command chair, watching the repair teams work frantically to keep his ship operational. They had been fighting for 8 hours straight, and exhaustion was beginning to show on every face. "Hull breach in Section 4 is sealed," Chief Engineer Clark reported over the crackling intercom. "But we've lost primary life support in the forward compartments. I'm rerouting backup systems, but we're running on borrowed time." Morrison nodded grimly. The ship's condition matched how he felt inside. Every system was pushed beyond its limits, held together by determination and desperate improvisation. "What about weapons?" Corporal Grant looked up from her damaged console, her left arm hanging in a makeshift sling. "We're down to 2 working torpedo tubes and 1 railgun. Ammunition reserves are at 15%. If we get into another major engagement, we'll be throwing wrenches at them." Lieutenant Foster worked at her station despite a bandage wrapped around her head from where a console had exploded earlier. "Captain, I'm still monitoring the evacuation progress. They've got 9 million people loaded, but the remaining ships are having mechanical problems. They're requesting another 4 hours. 4 more hours." Morrison closed his eyes and tried to calculate if they could possibly last that long. Their weapons were nearly gone, their ship was falling apart, and the enemy was bringing in fresh reinforcements. The smart thing would be to retreat, to save what was left of his crew and ship, but 10 million people were still on that colony world, and retreat meant leaving them to die. "Sir," Foster said quietly, "long-range sensors are detecting more alien ships entering the system. It looks like they're bringing in their heavy battleships." Morrison opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. The new contacts were massive, each one larger than anything they had faced so far. These were not patrol ships or cruisers, but true warships designed to destroy entire fleets. "They're getting serious," he observed. "Captain," came Clark's voice from engineering, "I need to tell you something about our reactor. The power coupling we jury-rigged 8 hours ago is failing. We've got maybe 2 hours before we lose main power completely." Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. His ship was dying, his crew was exhausted and wounded, and the enemy was bringing overwhelming force to bear. Every rational part of his mind screamed that continuing this fight was pointless suicide, but then he thought about the families huddled in evacuation ships, children crying as they were separated from everything they had ever known. He thought about the farmers who had spent their lives growing food to feed the galaxy, the teachers who had dedicated themselves to educating the next generation, the ordinary people who had never asked for war but found themselves in its path. "Anyway, Foster, open a channel to the evacuation fleet," he ordered. "Channel open, sir." Morrison took a deep breath. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Defiant to all evacuation vessels. We're going to buy you as much time as we can, but you need to understand that our situation is deteriorating rapidly. Get those people loaded and get them out of here as fast as possible." The response came from Admiral Patricia Hayes, the civilian administrator coordinating the evacuation. "Captain Morrison, we're doing everything we can. The remaining ships are overloaded beyond safety limits, but we should have everyone aboard within 3 hours." "Understood. We'll hold the line." Morrison cut the channel and looked around his battered bridge. His crew was watching him with expressions that mixed fear, determination, and absolute trust. These people believed in him, believed in their mission, believed that what they were doing mattered. "All right, people," he said, standing up from his damaged chair. "We've got 3 hours to keep these aliens busy. Grant, what kind of creative options do we have left?" Grant consulted her tactical database despite her injured arm. "Sir, I've been thinking about this. We can't win a conventional fight anymore. But we don't need to. We just need to delay them and make them commit resources to hunting us instead of attacking the planet." "Go on. What if we don't try to destroy their ships? What if we focus on making them afraid of this asteroid field? We could set up traps, create hazards that make them reluctant to advance." Foster looked up from her station. "Actually, that might work. I've been monitoring their communications, and their commanders are getting increasingly frustrated. They're starting to view this entire field as dangerous territory." Morrison considered this. The human way of war had always been different from what most species expected. Where others relied on superior technology or overwhelming numbers, humans used psychology, deception, and the enemy's own assumptions against them. "What did you have in mind?" he asked Grant. "We still have some demolition charges left over from our mining operations. What if we rig some of the larger asteroids to explode when ships get too close? We could turn this entire field into a minefield." That's... Morrison paused, thinking through the implications. "That's brilliant. Even if the explosions don't destroy their ships, they'll make the aliens think twice about advancing." The next 2 hours became a frantic race against time. The Defiant moved through the asteroid field, planting demolition charges on carefully selected rocks. Grant calculated blast patterns and debris trajectories while Foster programmed proximity sensors. Clark somehow kept the failing ship operational through sheer force of will and creative engineering. Meanwhile, the alien fleet grew larger and more threatening. Admiral Kexthal had brought in his heaviest warships, vessels capable of reducing planets to rubble, but he was also becoming increasingly cautious about entering the asteroid field, where a single human ship had already cost him over 50 vessels. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "our advanced scouts report that the asteroid field appears to be extensively mined. Several ships have reported explosions when approaching what seem to be normal rocks." Kexthal studied the tactical display with growing frustration. "How is this possible? That human ship has been under constant pursuit. When did they have time to plant mines?" "Unknown, sir. But our pilots are reporting that the entire field feels like a trap now. Every asteroid could be rigged to explode." This was exactly what Morrison had hoped for. The aliens were now seeing threats everywhere, slowing their advance and committing more resources to clearing paths that might not even be mined. But the Defiant was paying a heavy price for the deception. During the mining operation, they had been forced to engage several alien patrol groups. Each fight cost them ammunition they couldn't spare and caused damage they couldn't fully repair. "Captain," Foster called out, blood running down her face. "From a fresh cut? I'm getting reports from the evacuation ships. The last transport is loaded and ready to depart, but their engines are overloaded. They're requesting escort to the jump point." Morrison felt a moment of pure relief. They had done it. All 12 million colonists were aboard evacuation ships and ready to escape. But his relief was short-lived as he realized the implications. "How long to reach the jump point?" he asked. "At their current speed, 45 minutes. "But Captain, those transports are defenseless." "If the aliens break through and catch them... Morrison understood. Their job wasn't finished until those civilian ships were safely away. The Defiant would have to hold the line for almost another hour while operating on a failing reactor with almost no weapons left. "Clark, how long can you keep us running?" The engineer's voice was strained with exhaustion. "Maybe 30 minutes before the reactor shuts down completely. After that, we'll be drifting on emergency power." Morrison looked at the tactical display one more time. The alien fleet was massing for a final assault, bringing their largest ships to bear. Admiral Kexthal had clearly decided that enough was Enough, sir, Grant said quietly. I'm reading massive energy signatures from their flagship. It looks like they're charging some kind of super weapon. Morrison studied the enemy formation. The huge alien flagship was positioning itself for a clear shot at the planet. If that weapon fired, it wouldn't matter whether the evacuation ships had escaped or not. The orbital facilities, the remaining infrastructure, everything would be destroyed. They're going to glass the planet, he realized. Even with the colonists gone, they want to make sure nothing survives. Foster's face went pale. Captain, there are still some people down there? Emergency responders, security personnel, volunteers who stayed behind to help with the evacuation. Maybe 1,000 people total. 1,000 people who had volunteered to risk their lives so that others could escape safely. Morrison felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the weight of command and the burden of impossible choices. Grant, do we have enough firepower left to damage that flagship? Grant studied her displays, running calculations with the desperate intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible equation. Sir, if we used everything we have left, including the self-destruct charges, we might be able to damage their main weapon. But it would mean... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge understood what she meant. The Defiant turned toward the massive alien flagship, her damaged engines straining to build speed for what everyone knew would be their final run. Captain Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under the stress of maximum acceleration. Captain, Foster called out, her voice cutting through the noise of failing systems. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Something big is coming. Morrison's heart skipped a beat. The evacuation ships? No, sir, these signatures are different military vessels, and they're coming fast. On the main screen, space suddenly filled with brilliant flashes of light as ships dropped out of hyperspace. Morrison counted 27 vessels, led by a massive battlecruiser that dwarfed even the alien flagship. The newcomer's hull bore the distinctive markings of the human colonial navy. "This is Admiral Richard Hayes aboard the UES Retribution," came a voice over the communication system. "Captain Morrison, we received your distress call. Sorry we're late to the party." Morrison felt tears of relief streaming down his face. The cavalry had arrived, but even as hope surged through him, he realized they might still be too late. "Admiral, the alien flagship is charging a planet-killer weapon. They're going to destroy everything on Kepler 442b. We see it, Captain. All ships, emergency acceleration. Target that flagship's main weapon." The newly arrived human fleet raced toward the alien formation, but Morrison could see they were still several minutes away. The alien weapon would fire long before Admiral Hayes could get within range. "Sir," Grant reported, "the alien weapon will be ready to fire in 90 seconds. Even at maximum speed, our backup won't reach them in time." Morrison looked at his tactical display one more time. The Defiant was still the closest human ship to the alien flagship, close enough to potentially disrupt their weapon if they could ram the right section. "Foster, get me a direct channel to Admiral Hayes." "Channel open, sir." "Admiral, this is Morrison. We're going to ram their flagship and try to disable that weapon. Tell my crew's families that they died protecting innocent people." "Captain." "Wait, let us handle this. You've done enough." Morrison smiled sadly. "Admiral, with respect, sir, this is what we came here to do. Take care of those evacuation ships." He cut the channel before Hayes could respond and turned to his crew. "All hands, brace for impact. It's been an honor serving with you." The Defiant accelerated toward the alien flagship, her dying reactor pushed beyond all safety limits. The massive enemy vessel grew larger on the screen, its hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize the human frigate in seconds, but Admiral Kexthal had made a critical error. In his rage and frustration, he had focused all his attention on charging the planet-killer weapon. His defensive systems were not prepared for a kamikaze attack by a ship that had already been written off as destroyed. 30 seconds to impact," Foster reported, her voice steady despite the certain death. Rushing toward them, Morrison watched the alien flagship fill their entire field of view. He could see the massive weapon charging, energy building to levels that would crack the planet's crust. But he could also see the weapon's weak point, the focusing array that concentrated all that power into a single devastating beam. Grant, arm all remaining charges. We're going to take that weapon with us. All charges armed and ready, Captain. 10 seconds to impact. Morrison closed his eyes and thought about the 12 million people who were now safe in hyperspace, the 1,000 volunteers who had stayed behind to help with the evacuation, and the 43 crew members who had never hesitated. When asked to sacrifice everything for strangers, the Defiant struck the alien flagship at full speed, her reinforced bow punching through the enemy's hull like a spear. The impact drove the human ship deep into the alien vessel's superstructure, directly into the heart of the charging weapon system. Now, Morrison shouted. Grant triggered every explosive device remaining on the ship. The combined detonation of torpedo warheads, demolition charges, and the ship's own reactor created a chain reaction that tore through the alien flagship's interior. The planet-killer weapon, its delicate focusing arrays destroyed, discharged. It stored energy harmlessly into space. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. When the light faded, both ships were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of debris and superheated gas. Admiral Hayes watched the destruction from the bridge of the Retribution, his face grim with both admiration and sorrow. Signal all ships. Full attack. Let's finish what Captain Morrison started. The battle that followed was swift and decisive. The alien fleet, already demoralized by their losses in the asteroid field and shaken by the destruction of their flagship, found themselves facing fresh human warships crewed by personnel who had heard about the Defiant's heroic stand. The human ships fought with a fury that the aliens had never encountered before. Every torpedo launched, every railgun fired, every tactical decision was made in honor of the 43 crew members who had held the line against impossible odds. Admiral Kexthal, commanding from a secondary vessel, watched his mighty fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow the accepted rules of galactic warfare. These humans fought with an intensity that bordered on madness, as if the death of their comrades had only made them stronger. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're losing ships faster than we can count them. The humans are using ramming attacks, suicide runs, anything to cause maximum damage. Kexthal finally understood what his tactical officer had tried to tell him hours earlier. These humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to protect something larger than themselves, something that made them willing to die rather than retreat. Signal the fleet, he ordered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Full retreat. We are withdrawing from this system. The surviving alien ships fled into hyperspace, leaving behind nearly 2/3 of their original force. The Zephyrian Empire had suffered its first major defeat, and word of the battle spread quickly through the galaxy. 3 days later, Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Retribution as the evacuation fleet returned to Kepler 442. The planet's surface was scarred but intact, and the colonists were already making plans to rebuild. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. High Command wants a full report on the battle. Hayes nodded, but his attention was focused on the asteroid field where the battle had taken place. Recovery. Teams were still searching for survivors from the Defiant, though everyone knew it was a hopeless task. Sir, the communications officer continued, there's something else. We're getting reports from across the galaxy. The story of the Defiant's stand is spreading. Resistance movements on occupied worlds are using it as a rallying cry. Hayes smiled grimly. One ship against a fleet of 200. The odds were impossible, but they held the line anyway. Should I include that in the report to High Command? Include everything. Let them know that Captain Morrison and his crew didn't just save 12 million colonists. They showed the galaxy what human courage looks like when everything is on the line. As the Retribution prepared to leave the system, Hayes authorized the construction of a memorial beacon in the asteroid field where the Defiant had made her final stand. The beacon would transmit a simple message to any ship that passed through the system. Here, 43 members of the human colonial navy held the line against overwhelming odds. They chose to stand and fight rather than abandon innocent people to their fate. Their sacrifice saved 12 million lives and proved that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. The beacon also carried the names of every crew member who had served aboard the Defiant, from Captain Jake Morrison to the youngest enlisted rating who had volunteered for an impossible mission, years later, when historians wrote about the war. Against the Zephyrian Empire, they would mark the Battle of Kepler 442b as the turning point. Not because it was the largest engagement or involved the most ships, but because it was the moment when the galaxy learned that humans would never surrender, never retreat, and never abandon those who depended on them. The Zephyrian Empire, shaken by their defeat and the growing resistance movements inspired by the Defiant's example, began to reconsider their expansion into human space. They had learned that conquering humanity required more than superior technology and overwhelming numbers. It required breaking something that could not be broken, defeating something that grew stronger with each defeat, and somewhere in the cold vacuum of space, in the expanding debris cloud that had once been the UES Defiant, the legacy of 43 heroes continued to inspire a galaxy to resist tyranny and fight for freedom. No matter the odds, the line had been held, the innocent had been saved. And the universe had learned what it meant to face human courage when everything that mattered was at stake.